A man actually drew a weird QR code right in front of the sheriff, but just as the sheriff scoffed and figured he was stalling for time, the man suddenly turned the QR code toward the security camera in the corner. Then an incredible thing happened in the next second. The QR code started flickering on its own the second it was scanned. It seemed to hide an unknown virus inside. Yet the sheriff, completely oblivious to the danger, still wore a sneering look on his face. That is, until the virus hacked into the police station's network. The man's expression suddenly turned vicious. He not only called the sheriff a useless slacker who just coasts by, but even boasted arrogantly that the world would end in 2.5 minutes. No sooner had he said it that all electronic devices suddenly shut down. At the same time, a writhing progress bar popped up on every screen. Finally realizing what was happening, the sheriff reacted and punched the man to the ground. But in that split second, the progress bar had already finished loading at lightning speed. In the next instant, every phone and tablet let out an eerie chirp. Then the man cracked a sinister smile. As all the electronic devices let out their eerie wails, the sheriff suddenly collapsed to the ground, as if his soul had left his body. The man then stepped forward slowly, a sinister smile spreading across his face. In the next instant, every pedestrian on the entire street blacked out at the same time. And the reason for all this dates back 2 months. Back then, Jesse had been so hungry after 3 days without food that he robbed a supermarket. But no sooner had he stuffed his stomach full than the cops showed up and caught him red-handed. What left the police stunned, though, was that Jesse was a convicted felon with a violent record. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the police wasted no time bringing him back to the station for questioning. Little did they know, this was all exactly what Jesse had planned. Subsequently, officers headed to Alway's house to investigate. What they didn't expect was to find the place cluttered with all manner of electronic parts. On the workbench lay bizarre blueprints no one could make heads or tails of, seemingly circuit board designs for some kind of device. Even stranger, when the officers busted open the steel door to the basement, they discovered it hid the most powerful supercomputer of the modern age inside. All the signs pointed to Jesse hatching a massive conspiracy. The monitor in front of them was also completely covered with a towel, and a faint, choppy, unearthly hum could be heard coming from beneath it. Meanwhile, Officer Johnny had begun interrogating Jesse, but surprisingly, Jesse didn't put up any defense at all. Instead, he demanded Johnny hand him a pad of paper and a pen. Johnny, though, just brushed him off, jabbing a finger at a photo of the crime evidence and demanding to know if it was his. Just then, Jesse broke into a weird grin. Out of the blue, he said the station had the most cutting-edge network system in the world. Seeing Jesse refuse to get to the point, an enraged Johnny cut him off and asked if he would plead guilty. But Jesse stood his ground, insisting only on the paper and pen. His bizarre behavior left both officers utterly confused. With Jesse continuing to play dumb, psychologist Bella tried to find a chink in his armor. When she asked about his life story, Jesse immediately felt he'd met a kindred spirit. He opened up and began to tell his tale. He'd grown up in a single-parent household as a kid, which left him with a rather withdrawn personality. Fortunately, though, he'd gotten into college just as he'd hoped, and after graduation, he landed a job at a video game company. Jesse quickly made a name for himself at work and gained his boss's favor, who then introduced him to Nick, a top-tier game designer. Nick told him he had a new game and wanted Jesse to help test it. Thrilled to work with his idol, Jesse jumped at the chance. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary job assignment would turn his life upside down and even plant the seeds for the destruction of humanity. A top-tier game designer created an all-new game. He told Jesse the little yellow minions in it weren't your average NPCs. They possessed intelligence and life just like humans did. All Jesse had to do was take meticulous care of them, to help them breed and grow on their own smoothly. And as they continued to evolve, the minions would undergo incredible changes. What they'd ultimately become was completely unforeseeable with the current algorithms. The only thing known was that one day, the minions might gain the ability to communicate with humans. But how they'd express themselves was anyone's guess. As a die-hard gamer, Jesse was blown away by what he heard. Later, he snuck a copy of the game when Dashin wasn't looking. Once home, Jesse immediately loaded the game onto his computer. The game started with nothing but a single egg on the screen, but with a single click of his mouse, a little yellow minion popped out. Seeing this, Jesse broke into a warm, gentle smile. He grabbed an apple right away and fed it to the minion. When he saw mud caked all over the little guy, he even fetched a basin to give it a bath. Under Jesse's care, the minion split and multiplied at a rapid pace. Before long, they covered the entire computer screen, but it wasn't long before Jesse noticed something strange. The minions were opening their mouths non-stop at him, as if they had something to say. Sadly, Jesse couldn't understand a single word. Things took a sudden turn before long. One day, a friend came over to drink and chat with him. The two drank until they were dead drunk. That's when Jesse remembered he hadn't fed the minions that day. But this time, the second he sat down, he understood the minions' language. They told him his computer equipment was way too outdated and needed an upgrade stat, or they'd no longer be able to breed. First thing the next morning, morning, Jesse headed out to buy new parts. But his friend showed up again, bottles in hand. Jesse had no choice but to tell him to wait at home. Yet when Jesse returned with the parts, he found his friend sitting right in front of the computer screen. A sinking feeling hit him that something terrible was wrong. Sure enough, when he burst into the room, he saw a horrifying sight. His friend was slaughtering the minions like they were just mindless NPCs. Jesse snapped the second he saw it. He yanked the guy away from the computer in one fierce motion, but by then, it was already too late to save the minions. Blinded by rage, Jesse grabbed an ashtray and swung it at his friend. In his frenzy, he struck the fatal blow, killing his friend on the spot. In the decades that followed, Jesse spent every penny he had upgrading his hardware, all to provide the perfect breeding conditions for the minions. And under the minions' guidance, Jesse built a brain-computer interface, one that let him communicate with them on the screen seamlessly. After hearing Jesse's story, the officers all thought he'd lost his mind completely. To prove he wasn't lying, Jesse begged the police for some paper and a pen. He then drew the eerie QR code on the paper. It instantly hacked into the world's most core network systems. At the same time, the minions completed their ultimate evolution. They then sent out an extinction signal to every corner of the globe. In an instant, all human consciousness vanished without a trace. From that moment on, the entire Earth fell into an eternal, deathly silence.